the planet of Vorlith, once shone like a green jewel in the darkness of space. Forests spread from mountain to mountain, and silver rivers ran like veins through a living world. But that was long ago. Now, the same lands were nothing but ash and dust. The sky was a gray mirror that never cleared, and the winds carried only sand and the smell of death. The Vorlons, the people of this world, walked slowly through broken cities. Their tall, thin bodies once stood proud, but now they bent under the weight of hunger. Their large, dark eyes no longer looked to the stars. They only searched the ground for something to eat. Once, the Vorlons had machines that flew in the air and gathered food from the sea. Once, their science had brought them power, comfort, and peace. But peace had made them weak. They forgot the old ways of survival. They forgot the art of the hunt. Then the sun dimmed, and the great machines failed. The crops died first. The animals followed. And the Vorlon, for all their knowledge, could do nothing but watch their world fall apart. In the capital city of Arova, silence ruled. The great towers that touched the clouds now stood empty. The streets were filled with the echoes of footsteps and the soft cries of the hungry. Children with thin faces stared at the sky, hoping for rain. But rain never came. The elders gathered each day in the Hall of Light, though the lights had long gone out. They spoke in low voices. Some said the gods were angry. Others said it was a punishment for forgetting their strength. But no one had an answer. Among them was Alara, the youngest council leader. Her pale blue skin had lost its color, and her eyes carried both fear and fire. She looked out the broken window at the dying land and whispered, "If we do nothing, our people will vanish." Her aide, an old male named Kor, shook his head. "There is nothing left to do. The world is ending. We should prepare for the end." But Alara refused to believe it. There had to be a way, some answer beyond their weak hands and empty stomachs. Yet even her hope began to fade. Days passed, then weeks. The food stores grew empty. One night, as the twin moons rose, the sky began to tremble. A deep sound rolled across the land, a roar that no one had heard before. The people looked up in fear. The stars themselves seemed to move. Then fire streaked through the heavens. Something was falling, something huge. It tore through the clouds, burning bright like a second sun. The ground shook as it crashed into the western dunes beyond the city. For a moment, there was silence. Then the wind carried the sound of impact, a dull, thunderous cry. The Vorlons gathered at the edge of the city, staring at the distant smoke. Alara stood among them, her eyes wide. "What is it?" someone whispered. She did not answer. Instead, she felt something deep inside, a spark of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The next morning, she led a small group of scouts across the dunes. The sand was rough and sharp under their bare feet. The sun hung low, weak and pale. They reached the crash site by midday. What they saw made them freeze. A ship, small, broken, and blackened, half buried in the sand. Smoke rose from its twisted hull. The metal was strange, not like anything made on Vorlith. Symbols marked its side, letters none of them could read. "Is it from the stars?" Kor whispered. Alara nodded slowly. "It must be, but why now?" They approached with care. The air smelled of burnt oil and fire. Then a sound came from inside, soft at first, then louder. A groan. Something was alive. Alara motioned for the others to stay back. She stepped forward, her hands shaking. With a long breath, she reached for the door of the wreck. The metal was hot. It opened with a heavy creak. Inside lay a figure. Not Vorlon. Not any race they knew. It was a human. His skin was pale, covered in blood and dirt. His clothes were torn, his body bruised. Yet he was alive, breathing, moving slightly. Alara knelt beside him. "He's still breathing." she said in shock. Kor frowned. Then what is he? Some kind of machine? The human's eyes opened slowly. They were a deep brown, full of confusion and pain. He looked around, then at them. His voice was rough, broken. Where am I? He whispered. Alara hesitated. You are on Vorlith, our world. The human tried to sit up, but fell back. Vor laugh, he repeated. Not Earth. The word meant nothing to them, but his tone carried something. Sorrow, maybe loss. They brought him back to the city. The people gathered, whispering as they saw the strange being. Some were afraid, others curious. Why help it? One asked. Alara looked at them and said, Because he fell from the stars. Maybe he brings a reason for us to live. That night, as the humans slept, the city watched him in silence. For the first time in months, the wind felt softer, and far above the gray sky cleared, just a little, showing one small star still shining through. Alara looked up at it and whispered, Maybe our end is not today. But deep down, none of them could know that this one fragile being, this single human, would change everything. Because soon they would learn that humans, those strange survivors from a distant world, knew one thing better than any race alive: how to fight for life. The human awoke to silence, not the deep, empty silence of space, but a living one, full of whispers, breathing, and the sound of cautious footsteps. When he opened his eyes, dim light filled his vision. A soft blue glow came from thin crystals hanging on the walls. Around him stood tall figures, gray-blue skin, dark eyes, long limbs. Their faces were full of curiosity and fear. The human's head pounded. He tried to sit up, but his ribs screamed in pain. Where am I? He said weakly. A calm voice answered. You are safe. You are on Vorlith. He turned his head and saw her, Alara, standing beside his bed. Her eyes watched him carefully, but not with hate, more with wonder. I'm Captain James Hale, he said. His voice was hoarse, dry. Exploration Fleet. Earth Alliance. The aliens looked at each other, confused by the words. Earth. Alliance. None of it meant anything to them. Alara stepped closer. You fell from the sky, she said softly. Your ship burned the clouds. We thought it was the end of the world. Hale gave a small laugh, though it hurt. I guess it almost was. My ship's reactor failed. I ejected before the explosion. Looks like I got lucky. Lucky? One of the Vorlons muttered. No one is lucky on Vorlith anymore. Hale's tired eyes studied the room. He saw bones of small animals stacked in a corner. He saw thin hands, weak bodies. The air smelled of smoke and sickness. You're starving, he said quietly. Alara nodded. Our crops are dead. The world is dying. The skies give no rain. We survive one day at a time. Hale frowned. And your people you don't hunt? A shocked murmur filled the room. One of the elders stepped forward, his voice full of pride and pain. We are not beasts. We have not hunted for 1,000 years. The human blinked. Then how do you eat? We used to grow what we needed. We had machines, farms, labs, all gone now. Hale leaned back slowly, his mind turning. A world full of intelligent beings, but helpless against hunger. It didn't make sense. He looked at Alara again. You said the world is dying, but maybe it's just testing you. She tilted her head. Testing us. Yeah, Hale said. On Earth, when things went bad, we didn't sit and wait. We fought back. Nature doesn't give mercy. You take what you need to survive. The Vorlons stared at him, uncertain. His words were strange, even dangerous. Alara asked, And how do your people take what they need? Hale gave a tired smile. We hunt. Silence filled the chamber. The word itself seemed heavy. To the Vorlons, hunting was something from ancient legends, something wild and cruel. Ilara folded her hands. We forgot how to hunt long ago. We believed ourselves above it. Hale's voice grew firmer. Maybe that's a problem. Sometimes survival means remembering the old ways. He tried to stand, but his leg gave out. Ilara moved quickly to support him. His weight was heavy on her shoulder. You need rest, she said. I need air, he replied. Show me your world. They stepped outside the shelter. The sky was dim, colored in gray and red. The city stretched below, tall towers made of stone and metal, now cracked and lifeless. No birds, no movement, only wind. Children sat near fires, their eyes hollow. Old men stared at the ground, waiting for something that would never come. Hale looked at all of it, the dying people, the wasted land, and felt anger rise in him. You're giving up, he said. Ilara turned sharply. We have no choice. There's always a choice, he said, his voice low but firm. You've forgotten what it means to fight for life. Her eyes narrowed. Fight with what? We have no weapons, no strength. Hale knelt, scooping up a handful of sand. He let it fall through his fingers. You don't need weapons. You need will. He stood again, unsteady but certain. I can teach you, he said, if you want to learn. Ilara frowned. Teach us what? The art of the hunt. The words seemed to echo through the empty streets. That night, word spread quickly across the city. The stranger from the sky, the human, had challenged the curse. Some call him a fool. Others said he was a gift from the stars. Ilara sat alone in the Hall of Light, watching the broken moon through the cracks in the roof. Could one dying man really change the fate of a world? But when she closed her eyes, she remembered his voice. You've forgotten how to fight. And something deep within her, something ancient, stirred again. The next morning, she found him outside the city walls. He had built a small fire and was sharpening a piece of broken metal. You truly mean to hunt? She asked. Hale looked up, his face calm. I don't mean to. I will. Ilara studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Then I will come with you. Hale smiled faintly. Good. You'll need to learn fast. As the two of them walked into the wasteland, the winds rose around them, carrying the smell of dust and ash. But this time, the silence didn't feel hopeless. Somewhere out there, in the dying wilds of Orlith, life still moved. And the human would find it. Because humans, no matter the world, no matter the odds, always do. The desert stretched like an ocean of dust. The wind howled over broken stones, carrying the whispers of a dying world. And walking through it, side by side, were Ilara and the human, Captain James Hale. Neither spoke for a long time. The only sound was a crunch of sand beneath their feet, and the distant call of unseen creatures hiding somewhere beyond the dunes. Ilara's eyes followed Hale as he moved. His steps were steady, his eyes scanning every shadow, every crack in the ground. He was weak, still recovering, but there was something about him, a quiet focus, a strength she had never seen before. Finally, she asked, What are we looking for? Hale didn't answer right away. He knelt down, running his fingers through the sand. Life, he said softly. It always finds a way to hide. You just have to learn how to see it. Ilara frowned. There is no life here, only dust. Hale smiled faintly. That's what most people think right before they die of hunger. He pointed toward a small ridge in the distance. Up there. Let's move. They climbed slowly, the heat pressing down on them like a heavy blanket. Ilaria's body ached, but Hale seemed almost alive in this dead place, his eyes alert, his breath calm. When they reached the ridge, he crouched low and motioned for her to do the same. Look down there, he whispered. Below, the ground was cracked and pale, but small trails crossed it, thin, curving lines like marks from claws or hooves. Elara squinted. Tracks. Hale nodded. Something passed through here. Recently. She looked at him in disbelief. You can tell that just from the sand? He grinned. The sand tells you everything, if you know how to listen. Elara stared at him. You speak of sand as if it's alive. It is, Hale said. Everything is alive, even the silence. He moved quickly, his body low, studying each print. This way, he said. Elara followed, still unsure. The trail led them to a narrow canyon, dark and deep. The air was cooler here, and small plants clung to the rocks, gray, dry things that somehow refused to die. This, Hale said, pointing to the plants, is where life hides when the world goes mad. He knelt and brushed the dirt aside. Beneath the roots, he found small holes in the sand, tunnels. Elara gasped. Creatures? Desert runners. Hale said, quick, smart, and edible. She blinked at him. Edible? He chuckled. Food, Elara. Remember that word. She folded her arms. You mean to kill them? His face turned serious. I mean to keep you alive. Elara looked away. The Vorlons had forgotten such things. Hunting was a story for children, a shameful act from the past. But as she stood there, weak from hunger, she began to understand something. Pride could not fill an empty stomach. Hale pulled out a length of broken wire and a few metal scraps he had scavenged from his crashed ship. With steady hands, he began twisting them together. What are you doing? She asked. Building a trap, he said simply. He shaped the metal into a loop, tied it with wire, and set it gently near the tunnel entrance. He covered it with sand and stepped back. Now we wait. They sat together in silence. The sun dropped lower, painting the sky in red and gold. The wind cooled. Elara finally spoke. You humans are all like this? Hale raised an eyebrow. Like what? Determined, unafraid of death. He smiled a little, his eyes distant. No one is unafraid of death. We just don't let it win. Minutes passed. Then a sound, a faint rustle. Hale's eyes sharpened. He raised a finger, signaling her to stay still. The sand near the trap shifted. Something small and fast darted out. A desert runner, sleek and four-legged, its scales reflecting the sunset. The creature sniffed the air, cautious. Then it stepped closer. Snap! The trap sprang shut. The runner twisted and struggled, but it was caught. Elara jumped back in shock. Hale moved forward quickly, ending the creature suffering with a sharp strike from a rock. He lifted it up, small, fragile, yet full of life. Dinner, he said simply. Elara stared, silent. She didn't know what to feel. Fear, shame, or relief. Hale set the creature down gently and looked at her. This is what it means to survive. The world doesn't care about your rules or your pride. It only cares if you can adapt. She swallowed hard. Adapt? He nodded. The strong don't always win. The ones who learn do. As night fell, they built a small fire beside the canyon. Hale cleaned the creature with care, roasting it slowly over flames. The smell filled the air, strange but rich. Elara hesitated before taking a bite. Her hands shook, but the taste, warm, real, alive, broke something inside her. Tears ran down her cheeks as she ate. Hale said nothing. He just watched the stars. When she finished, she whispered, "It feels wrong, but also right." He looked at her and said quietly, "That's how survival feels." The fire crackled between them. The desert wind whispered over the dunes, carrying their shadows far into the night. Somewhere deep inside her, Elara felt the first spark of something powerful, something her people had lost long ago. It was not hope. It was hunger, the hunger to live. The morning came cold and gray. A soft mist rolled across the wasteland, hiding the broken towers of the old world. The fire from the night before had died, leaving only a circle of black ash. Ilera stood quietly, her cloak wrapped tight around her thin frame. She still felt the taste of the meat in her mouth, the strange flavor that had awakened something she didn't understand. Hunger, yes, but also strength. Hale was already awake, kneeling in the dust, carving something from a piece of metal. His movements were careful, practiced. The man who had fallen from the stars no longer looked weak or lost. He looked like someone who belonged out here, a creature built for survival. "What are you making?" she asked. He didn't look up. "A spear." Ilera frowned. "You plan to fight with that?" He smiled faintly. "You fight with what you have. That's lesson 2. He finished shaping the weapon, a long rod of pipe, its end sharpened into a deadly point. He handed it to her. "Try it." She took it awkwardly, feeling the rough metal in her hands. It was heavy. She tried to hold it like a staff, but Hale shook his head. "Not like that. It's not for walking. It's for surviving." He stood beside her, adjusting her grip. "Your arms straight. Elbow locked. Keep your eyes where you want to go. The spear follows your will." Ilera laughed softly. "Your words sound like riddles." "Maybe," he said, "but they work." He stepped back and threw his own spear at a pile of stones. The weapon flew straight and fast, hitting the target with a sharp crack. Ilera blinked. "You did that without machines." "Machines don't hunt," Hale said simply. "People do." She tried next. Her throw was clumsy. The spear spun and fell halfway to the target. Hale nodded. "Not bad. You missed, but you tried." Ilera sighed. "It feels wrong. We are not built for this." Hale crouched beside her. "Neither are humans. Not really. We learned because we had to. You will too." They trained until the sun rose high. By the 5th throw, Ilera hit the stones. The sound echoed across the empty plain, and for the first time in years she smiled. Hale grinned. "See? Told you. It's all about control." She wiped sweat from her brow. "You are strange, human. You teach killing as if it's art." He looked at the horizon. "It is art when it means life." That afternoon, they returned to the city. Ilera-esque people watched them from a distance. The human strange ways had already spread through whispers, stories of fire, traps, and meat. Some were curious. Others were disgusted. One elder stepped forward, his voice trembling with anger. "You bring the old curse back upon us. Ilera, the hunt belongs to beasts, not to the children of light." Ilera met his eyes. "The children of light are starving. The beasts are the only ones still alive." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Hale said nothing, standing quietly beside her. Then a young male stepped out, his face thin and hungry. "If she can hunt, then teach me too." The elder gasped. "You dare." But more voices joined in. 1, then 2, then 10. "Teach us. We want to learn." Ilera looked at Hale. He nodded once. That night, under the cold twin moons, Hale began his lessons. He showed them how to move without sound, how to watch the wind, how to read the ground for signs of life. He taught them to craft simple weapons from scrap metal and broken glass. At first, they were clumsy and unsure. They stumbled, missed, and cursed the dust. But Hale was patient. Every mistake was a lesson, every fall a step forward. When one young hunter grew frustrated, Hale placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not just chasing food," he said. "You're chasing survival. Don't give up." By the 3rd day, the Vorlons began to change. Their eyes grew sharper, their hands steadier. Their bodies, once weak, started to move with purpose. Ilera watched with pride. The spark she'd seen in Hale was spreading through her people, through their hearts. They made their first successful hunt together at sunset. A small group of creatures, swift and fierce, crossed the dunes. Hale led the charge, but the Vorlons followed without fear. When it was done, they stood over their prize, real food, enough to feed dozens. The crowd back in the city cheered. Children laughed. Fires burned bright again. For the first time in years, the smell of cooking filled the streets. Illyra stood beside Hale as they watched the people eat. "You've given them hope," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, I just reminded them what it feels like to earn it." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are not like us. You are not even from this world. Why help us?" Hale's face grew distant. The flames reflected in his eyes. "Because once, on a world far away, someone helped me. I don't forget debts like that." Illyra nodded slowly. "Then we will not forget you." But Hale's gaze stayed fixed on the dark horizon. "Don't thank me yet," he said quietly. "The hunt is just beginning." Far beyond the dunes, shadows moved, unseen eyes watching, waiting. The predators of Vorlith had noticed the return of prey that no longer ran, and in the silent wind came a promise. Survival would never come without a fight. The fires of the new hunters burned bright that night. The smell of roasted meat filled the city of Arova, drifting between the tall ruins and broken towers like a forgotten dream. Laughter echoed for the first time in many moons. The Vorlons ate and sang, their thin hands shaking as they tasted real food again. The children's eyes glowed with joy. Even the elders, once filled with despair, smiled quietly as the warmth of life returned. And among them, sitting near the flames, was Captain James Hale, the man from the stars. He didn't eat much. He just watched as a world long defeated began to rise again. This was what he wanted to see, that spark of survival, that will to live. But deep inside, he felt something else, a whisper, cold and quiet. Something was wrong. He looked beyond the fires, to the dunes beyond the city. The shadows there seemed thicker than usual, moving in ways the wind couldn't explain. He narrowed his eyes. They were being watched. Later that night, when most had fallen asleep, Hale stood guard alone on the city's outer wall. The wind hissed softly, carrying the distant cries of night creatures. The moons were pale above him, hanging low and thin. He saw a movement again, just a flicker, far out near the dunes. Too large to be a runner, too fast to be a sand beast. He raised his weapon, a simple spear reforged from scrap metal, and listened. The sand shifted, then silence, then a sound like laughter. But not human, not Vorlon. Something sharper, crueler. Hale's jaw tightened. He had heard that sound before. Not here, but on other worlds, in the dark places between stars where the desperate turned into monsters. He descended from the wall quietly and made his way through the sleeping streets. The firelight flickered on his face as he reached Illyra's shelter. She awoke at the first sound of his footsteps. "Hale!" He crouched near her. "We're not alone." Illyra blinked sleep from her eyes. "What do you mean?" "Out there," he said, pointing toward the dunes. "I saw movement. Not animals. Not wind." Her face hardened. "Raiders." Hale nodded once. "Scavengers, probably. They smell food. And weakness." Illyra rose quickly, her eyes full of alarm. "We have to warn the others." Hale put a hand on her shoulder. "Not yet. Panic will do their job for them." She frowned. "Then what do we do?" He looked toward the horizon, where the first hint of dawn painted the sky in silver. "We prepare, and we let them come." By morning, he had chosen 10 of the strongest Vorlons, the hunters he'd trained. They gathered near the outer ruins, nervous but determined. Hale paced before them like a commander before battle. "Listen carefully. You've learned to track, to hunt. But now, you'll learn something harder, how to defend what you hunted." The Vorlons exchanged uneasy glances. Illyra stepped forward. "We've never fought before. Not truly." Hale met her eyes. "Then you start today. Because if you don't fight, they'll take everything. And next time, they won't just take your food." The words hung heavy in the air. He taught them how to set traps, hidden pits, sharpened stakes buried in sand, lines of wire strung between ruins. Simple tricks, but deadly when used right. As they worked, he spoke quietly, almost to himself. Back on Earth, we had a saying, if you can't win by strength, win by will. Ilera watched him, fascinated. Your people must be warriors. Hale shook his head. No, survivors. There's a difference. By dusk, the traps were set. The hunters waited in silence. The fires were put out. The city slept in darkness once again. And from beyond the dunes, the shadows came. They arrived without sound. A dozen figures wrapped in black cloth, their eyes glowing faintly red in the dark. The scavengers of the wastes. Once, they were Vorlons too, but years of hunger and madness had twisted them. They lived by stealing, killing, feeding on the weak. Their leader, a tall creature with scars across his face, smiled as he saw the silent city below. Smell that, he said. Cooked meat. The city feasts again. One of his raiders chuckled. Then tonight we feast too. They crept closer, blades drawn, moving through the dunes like shadows. Then the first one screamed. He fell into a hidden pit, impaled on sharpened stakes. The others froze. Before they could react, a spear shot from the dark and struck another through the chest. Panic spread. Hale stepped out from behind the ruins, his voice cold. You should have stayed in the dark. The raiders turned toward him, growling. Human, one hissed. You don't belong here. Neither do you, he replied, lifting his weapon. The battle began. It was chaos, sharp, fast, and brutal. Hale moved like a storm, striking and dodging, using every piece of terrain as a weapon. The Vorlons fought beside him, clumsy at first, but their training showed. Ilera's spear caught one raider in the leg. Another hunter drove a blade into a scavenger's back. The cries of the fight echoed through the city. The raider leader roared, swinging a jagged blade at Hale. The human caught the strike with his arm guard, twisting and driving his elbow into the raider's jaw. The creature stumbled back, shocked. You fight like death itself. Hale's eyes burned. No, I fight like someone who refuses to die. He lunged forward, his spear piercing the leader's chest. The raider fell, gasping, the life fading from his glowing eyes. When it was over, the dunes were silent again. The scavengers were gone, some dead, others fleeing into the wastes. The Vorlons stood around Hale, breathing hard, covered in dust and blood. But they were alive. Ilera stepped closer. You did it. We did it. Hale looked around at the survivors. You fought, he said quietly. You didn't run. That's what matters. The young hunters smiled weakly, pride in their tired faces. Ilera looked at him, her voice trembling. They will come again, won't they? Hale nodded. Always. Because strength attracts challenge. That's the way of every world. She lowered her head. Then we'll be ready. He smiled faintly. That's the spirit. The next morning, the city gathered around the fallen raiders. The people watched in silence, some afraid, others amazed. These were the monsters that had haunted their dreams. Now they lay defeated. Ilera stood before the crowd and raised her voice. Last night, we fought for our right to live. The humans showed us how, not with magic, not with machines, but with courage. The crowd murmured, then shouted as one. For life? Hale stood at the edge of the gathering, his expression unreadable. He didn't seek praise. He only watched the faces of the people, strong again, alive again. Ilera approached him. You should speak to them, she said. He shook his head. No, they don't need my voice anymore. They have yours. She smiled softly. Then stay, at least for a while. We have much to rebuild. Hale looked out across the dunes. The wind carried the scent of blood and dust, but also something else, renewal. I'll stay, he said. But remember this, Ilera, the hunt doesn't end with food or battle. It ends when you stop fighting. Don't ever stop. Ilera nodded, her eyes full of light. We won't. As Hale walked away toward the horizon, the city behind him began to move again, not as victims, but as hunters reborn. The people of Vorlith had learned to fight for their future. But in the shadows of the far waste, another threat stirred. Something older, something watching. The true hunt had only begun. The sun rose over Vorlith like a dying ember. The light was weak, barely cutting to the haze that hung over the desert. But in that dim light, something new moved across the dunes. Hope. Where once there had been silence and starvation, there was now motion. The Vorlons were rebuilding. Fires burned. Voices echoed. Spears clashed in training, and laughter, real laughter, returned to the broken streets. They had survived the first attack. They had learned to fight. But Captain James Hale knew it wasn't over. He stood on the highest wall of Erova, looking out over the endless dunes. His eyes followed the horizon where sand met the pale sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of his sight, the scavengers were regrouping, angry, hungry, and afraid. And fear always made things dangerous. Illyra climbed the stairs behind him, her footsteps soft. "You haven't slept," she said quietly. He smiled without turning. "Humans don't sleep well after battles. Do you think they'll come back?" "They always do," Hale said. "You kill their leader, someone new takes his place. Someone worse." Illyra joined him on the wall, the wind blowing her hair across her face. "Then we'll fight again." He looked at her, admiring the fire in her voice. "You sound like a soldier now." "I sound like a survivor," she replied. Over the next few days, Hale trained the Vorlons harder than ever. The hunters learned to move as one, to strike and vanish, to read the sand and sense movement miles away. They built better weapons, stronger traps, faster signals. They even learned to make armor from the bones of the beasts they hunted. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. At night, Hale told them stories of Earth, of old wars and forgotten heroes, of humans who refused to surrender even when the sky fell. "The fight isn't about killing," he told them. "It's about living. It's about protecting what's left when everything else is gone." The Vorlons listened like children around a campfire, their eyes wide, their hearts burning with new purpose. But one evening, a scout returned, bleeding, breathless, terrified. "They're coming," he gasped. "Hundreds, maybe more. The scavengers have united." The city went silent. Illyra turned to Hale. "How many can we fight?" Hale's jaw tightened. "Not that many." "Then what do we do?" He looked at her, his voice steady. "We make them come to us. We fight smart." Night fell like a shroud. The dunes glowed faintly under the twin moons. In the distance, a sea of torches burned, the scavengers marching as one. Dozens of war banners fluttered in the cold wind. At their head walked a giant figure, taller than any Vorlon, wearing armor made of scavenged metal and bone. His face was hidden behind a skull mask. They called him the Warlord of Ash. He had heard stories of the human, the one who had turned prey into hunters. He had come to end them. "Burn the city," he growled to his followers. "Take what they have learned and leave nothing but bones." From the walls of Erova, Hale watched the approaching horde. He turned to his people. "This is it," he said. "They think we're still prey. They think we'll run. Let's prove them wrong." The hunters nodded, gripping their spears and bows. Their fear was still there, but behind it now stood something stronger: determination. Hale placed his helmet, a simple plate of scavenged steel, on his head. "Positions!" The city fell silent. The first wave of scavengers charged, screaming, howling, driven by hunger and rage. Then the sand exploded. Hidden pits collapsed, impaling the front line. Traps snapped shut, wires pulled tight, crushing limbs. Arrows rained down from the walls, striking glowing eyes in the dark. Hale stood at the center, shouting commands. "Hold the line. Don't waste your shots." Illyra and her hunters fired from the rooftops, each arrow finding its mark. The air filled with smoke, dust, and screams. Still, the enemy kept coming, wave after wave. When the walls began to shake under the assault, Hale jumped down into the streets, rallying the fighters. "Fall back to the second line," he ordered. "Draw them in." The scavengers stormed through the gates, roaring, but the streets of Erova were narrow, perfect for traps Hale had designed. Oil-filled jars were smashed, flames bursting to life. The enemy found themselves surrounded by fire and smoke. And then, from the rooftops, the hunters dropped down like shadows, spears first. The battle became chaos. Fire painted the walls red. The air was filled with the sound of metal striking bone, the cries of the dying and the roar of Hale's voice cutting through it all. "For Vorlith," he shouted. The Vorlons answered as one. "For life." But victory was far from certain. Through the smoke, the warlord of Ash appeared, a giant of metal and rage. His eyes burned red beneath his skull mask. He carried a blade made from a ship's wing, each swing slicing through stone. Hale met him head-on. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying. The force of blow threw Hale back, but he rolled to his feet, spear ready. "You're the human," the warlord growled. "The one teaching prey to fight." Hale spat blood. Someone has to remind them. The warlord laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You've brought them hope. I'll bring them despair." He charged. Hale dodged left, stabbing low, striking armor but not flesh. The warlord kicked, sending Hale crashing into a wall. Pain burned through his ribs, but he forced himself up. "You talk too much," he muttered. The warlord swung again. Hale ducked, rolling under the blade, slashing the creature's leg. Black blood sprayed across the sand. Ilara saw the fight from above. She shouted, "Hale!" and leapt down, joining him. Together, they circled the giant like wolves. "Left!" Hale yelled. She struck first, her spear glancing off the warlord's arm. He turned, roaring, and Hale drove his weapon into the open gap beneath the skull mask. The warlord screamed, thrashing wildly, then fell, shaking the ground. The battle froze. The scavengers stared, eyes wide, as their leader lay dead. Then, one by one, they dropped their weapons. Some fled, others knelt. The war was over. When the smoke cleared, Irova still stood, broken, bloodied, but alive. The hunters gathered in the city square. Fires burned high again, not for cooking, but for victory. Ilara approached Hale, her armor cracked, her face covered in dust and blood. "It's done," she said softly. Hale looked at the rising smoke. "For now." She frowned. "You don't celebrate much." He smiled weakly. "I've seen too many victories that didn't last. Survival isn't a moment. It's a habit." Ilara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then teach us to make it one." He looked at her, at the people gathering, the children watching, the hunters cleaning their blades, and nodded. "I will." That night, the stars broke through the clouds for the first time in years. The gray sky of Vorlith glowed faintly blue again. The city slept in peace, but Hale stayed awake, sitting alone by the wall. He held his broken spear in his hands, staring at it like an old friend. When Ilara found him, she sat beside him without a word. "You could leave," she said quietly. "Your ship might still be repaired. You could go home." Hale looked at the stars. "Maybe, but home isn't just where you come from. Sometimes it's where you're needed." Ilara smiled. "Then you are home." He nodded slowly. "Maybe I am." The wind blew softly through the city, carrying the faint scent of smoke, sweat, and life. In the distance, a lone hunter raised a spear to the sky and shouted a single word, a word that would echo through the generations to come. Humanity! And on that dying world, under the alien stars, the word took new meaning, not as a species, but as a spirit, the spirit that refuses to die. The wind that crossed the deserts of Vorlith no longer smelled of death. It smelled of life, of fire, food, and a living scent of sweat and soil. The war had ended weeks ago, but its echo remained in every street, every heart, every breath. Where ruins once slept, new walls were rising. The towers of Irova stood again, patched with steel and bone. Children laughed on rooftops where ash had fallen for years. The hunters trained in the open squares, their spears gleaming under a brighter sun. For the first time in generations, the light above the city was not gray. It was gold, and in that light walked Captain James Hale, the man who had fallen from the stars. He moved slowly now. His legs still hurt from the battle, and his ribs ached when he breathed too deep. But he smiled often, a quiet, tired smile, as he watched the Vorlons shaping their new world. They called him teacher, hunter, the human of fire. He never liked titles. To him, he was only a man doing what humans always did, surviving and helping others survive. Ilera found him one morning at the edge of the rebuilt wall. He was sitting alone, polishing the broken spear he had carried since the crash. "You still keep that old thing?" she asked. He looked up, grinning. A soldier never throws away what saved his life. She sat beside him, watching the desert shimmer under the rising sun. "The people are changing, Hale. They work harder, fight harder, live stronger. They don't pray for rescue anymore." "That's good," he said softly. "They shouldn't wait for saviors. They should be their own." Ilera smiled. "You made that happen." He shook his head. "No, I just reminded them who they were before comfort made them forget. You were born hunters. You only needed to remember the sound of your heartbeat." She looked at him with quiet admiration. "You could stay here forever, you know? We would build you a place among the council. You could help us shape this new world." Hale stared at the horizon. "Forever's a long time, Ilera. And humans, we don't stay still. Not for long. You want to leave." He nodded. "My ship's nearly repaired. I've sent a signal beacon. Maybe someone will come. Maybe not. But I can't stop trying." She looked down. "And if no one comes?" He smiled sadly. "Then I'll keep hunting. There's always something out there worth finding." That night, the council held a great gathering, a celebration of the new dawn. Every clan, every family came to Hall of Light, which now glowed again with torches and banners. The hunters stood proud, wearing armor of bone and cloth. The old songs had returned. But this time, they told stories of the human from the sky who taught them the ways of life and courage. When Hale entered, the hall fell silent. Ilera raised her hands. "Tonight, we honor the one who showed us how to live. We honor the one who reminded us that strength is not born, it is built." The crowd cheered, the sound filling the air like thunder. Hale stood awkwardly, scratching his beard. He was not used to applause. When the noise faded, he stepped forward and spoke simply. "I came here by accident. My ship crashed. I thought I was the last man alive. But instead, I found all of you, a people who had lost everything yet still had the fire to stand again. I didn't give you hope. You already had it. You just needed to fight for it." He paused, letting the silence grow. "The hunt isn't just about food or survival. It's about purpose. It's about never letting the world decide when you're finished. That's what humans believe. That's what you've learned. Keep it. Pass it on." Then he raised his broken spear high. "To the hunters of Vorlith," he said, "may your hearts never grow soft." The hall roared in answer. "We hunt. We live. We endure." The words shook the walls and carried out into the night. From that moment, they became more than a chant. They became the law of the new world. Days turned into weeks. The people grew stronger. They tamed the wild beasts that once hunted them. They planted again, learned to trade, to build, to explore beyond their dying deserts. Hale watched with pride, but felt the pull of the stars growing stronger each day. One evening, as the twin moons rose, a faint beacon blinked in the western sky. A signal. Weak, but real. Hale stared at it for a long time. It was the light of home, or at least a reminder of it. He knew what it meant. When dawn came, he packed his few belongings, a ration pack, a water flask, and a spear. The repaired shuttle waited outside the city, patched together with Vorlin metal and human stubbornness. Ilera met him there, surrounded by hunters and children. "So this is goodbye," she said quietly. He nodded. "For now." She looked at the ship, then back at him. "You changed us, James Hale. You changed our world." He smiled. "No, you changed yourselves. I just gave you a push." A small boy stepped forward and handed Hale a charm made of bone and crystal. "For luck," the child said, "like you taught us." Hale knelt, taking it gently. "Thank you, little hunter." Then he looked at Ilera one last time. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't let them forget. Teach every child what you've learned, not just how to fight, but why." She placed her hand over her heart. "I promise." He nodded, stepped into the shuttle, and sealed the hatch. The engines whined softly, glowing blue. Dust swirled around the craft as it lifted from the sand. The people of Vorlith watched in silence, not with sorrow, but with pride. Ilara whispered, "May the stars guide you, human." The ship rose higher, breaking through the clouds. For the first time in centuries, the people saw the sky truly open, a sea of stars shining down on them. And somewhere among those stars, a single human carried their story with him. Years passed. Vorlith flourished. The deserts turned green again, slowly but surely. New rivers carved paths through the canyons. The hunters became builders, explorers, dreamers. Every year, on the day the human ship had risen, the people gathered to retell the story of the art of the hunt. Children would shout the chant, their voices bright and full of life. "We hunt, we live, we endure." The elders would nod, remembering the man who had fallen from the sky, the one who had taught them that even in the darkest times, survival was not a curse but a choice. They built a statue of him in the center of Arova, not a king, not a god, but a man holding a spear, looking toward the stars. On the pedestal were 4 words, carved deep in both human and Vorlon script: strength through the hunt. Far away, among the stars, Captain James Hale watched the same sky from the window of a new ship. He was older now, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes still bright. A soft voice came through his communicator, the voice of an alien world he had once saved. Ilara of Vorlith calling the human Hale. "The hunt continues. The people live. Thank you." He smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Just keep fighting." He closed his eyes, listening to the hum of the engines. In the darkness of space, he whispered to himself, "They're ready now." Back on Vorlith, under the golden sky, Ilara stood before the statue at dusk. A young hunter approached her. "Do you think the human will return someday?" She smiled gently. "Maybe, or maybe he's already with us, in every spear, every heartbeat, every sunrise." Arn to fight for life.